I'm going to try not to take up too much of your time. Partly the idea behind this podcast was to make it like a bit of a digest, and not to kind of make either the guest or the audience sit here for hours. So even though I've got a million questions for you, I'm gonna desperately try and be concise. So we'll see how that goes.
I did have a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Did you happen to hear back from any of the Magic the Gathering folks? Like, did they ever get back to you at all?
Nobody's got back to me about it so far, no.
Okay. I'm gonna do some digging and see what's going on.
Cool. I mean, yeah, that'd be amazing. Obviously, no pressure, but if it's like easy, yeah, of course, it'd be amazing to know if they've got back to anybody.
Yep.
Always been a dream. So yeah, it was a cool opportunity when I saw it, when you posted it on the forum.
But hey, how long have you been doing this podcast?
It's been about a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, we've not always been as regular as we wanted to. Normally I have a co-host, an American co-host, Yashoda, but she travels a lot, so she couldn't make it, unfortunately. But she does say hi and sends us sincerest apologies that she couldn't make it. She was really keen to talk to you as well. But so you've just got me this time. And as I think I said when I probably emailed you, the idea is really it's just a conversation, like a lighthearted interview with people that we really admire in the industry. So when I kick it off, I'll just do a very short intro, but really just kind of let you introduce yourself and exactly what I know what you're doing, but just kind of from the horse's mouth. And then I've got a few themes as I emailed over, so we'll pretty much just launch into them. But we can go off on tangents, whatever. If there's anything you really want to talk about, we'll just dive into that. So it's pretty chilled.
Okay, sounds great.
Cool. Okay, so I'm just trying to remember. It's been a while since I started it. I'll just have a quick breather, and then I'll do the intro, and we'll go. Oh, to triple check, is it Avellone? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Oh, you got it right in the first try, Danny. Awesome.
Cool. Just double checking. Cool. Okay. Hello again, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Uncaring Universe, the transatlantic geek industry digest, co-hosted by myself, Danny Selfield-Wadeson, and the sadly absent Yashoda Sampath. And we're joined by a rather special guest this time. It's Chris Avellone.
Well, hello, Danny. Thanks for having me on the show. I love the title for your podcast.
Oh, that's always nice to hear. Do you? I don't suppose you get the reference. It's a very oblique reference.
No, I just sympathize with the entire theme of it.
Yeah, it's a fittingly kind of bleak podcast title. It's kind of a Mass Effect reference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is also kind of bleak when you think about it. So, but that's the idea.
The Mass Effect universe does have some problems with it, the Reaper invasions. It just it gets complicated, it gets sad, people die.
Yeah, there are a few hiccups.
It's an uncaring universe. Okay, now I get it.
Yeah. There you go. So that's a good compliment. I'll definitely take that from a good source. So Chris, a lot of the listeners are going to probably have a good idea about what you've been up to, but let's hear it straight from you. What's getting you out of bed in the morning at the moment?
Let's see. Actually, there's a number of projects that are going on right now. One is I got contacted by Night Dive Studios to work on the remastered version of System Shock, which is pretty cool because they always. So I'm like, wow, System Shock. There's a franchise I ever really wanted to work on. I'm like, wow, that's pretty much it. Like ever since System Shock 2, I'm like, that's a universe that I would love to write for. So that worked out pretty well. Also, I'm working on Prey with Arcane Studios, which is a lot of fun. And then also Divinity Original Sin 2 with Larian Studios. So there's quite a bit going on, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really having a good time.
Yeah, it's not a bad slate as video game writing goes.
It's not too shabby. It definitely gets me out of bed in the morning and also prevents me from going to bed at night because it's really hard to stop writing.
Yeah, but that's how you want it to be. And there was that quote from you in the Gamer Sutra article where you said, what I do now is roll out of bed. I don't get dressed. I don't shower. I just start writing immediately. All of my Skype calls have no video. And then I go to bed after about 11 hours. And I think that was a very productive day.
And Danny, you're really lucky this is a podcast and there's no camera involved, because I'm not wearing any clothes right now either. Like, it's just full on natural.
Well, that is the perk of the job, right? That's the beauty of being a writer. You're very much behind the camera. So so I mean, it's you're obviously, an amazing writer, and many of us, myself included, have grown up with many of your games. But just quickly, if you can remember, how did it all start? Like, what was that first spark when you knew, or indeed you just kind of fell into doing it for the first time?
Well, it's an interesting chain of events. It all started because I wanted to be a game player. This is going to sound weird, but my first love was pen and paper games like Dungeons and Dragons and Champions and all sorts of just tabletop, roll the dice, see what happens. But writing an adventure and like keeping people entertained is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And nobody I knew really wanted to do it, but I wanted to play. So I'm like, you know what? I'll game master, and then sort of vicariously through their experiences, I can get some percentage of enjoyment of, doing pen and paper games through them. Okay. But this didn't really cure them of the I don't really want a GM problem. It just made them keep being players. So after a while, I'm like, okay, well, I wrote all these adventures and I put a lot of work into them. It feels like a waste of time, my time, to not do anything else with these rather than just throw them in the garbage bin. So what I did was I sent them to various publications, and then they threw them in the garbage bin. And they're like, well, these are all pretty terrible. And I even had editors that were like, hey, please don't send me any more. Like, we haven't even gotten through your last ones. And
wow, you had actually personalized letters, like direct from the slush pile, being like, please don't fill up the slush pile anymore.
I don't know if you know Monty Cook, who did Numenera, and he worked on Planescape too. Like, he used to be an editor for the Champions role-playing game.
Sure.
And I would send him like module after module, and eventually he had a bad day one day. And he just wrote me back a really short, terse letter. He's like, just stop. Wow. But so that was a real eye opener. But it didn't stop me from trying. So eventually I did get something published, mostly because Champions was desperate. And after I realized that being in pen and paper games makes no money, I asked them if there was some other job they knew of that I could take that would still allow me to write for them. They're like, hey, well, Interplay Entertainment out in California started a D&D division. You could apply there. And so I did. And I worked on a few projects before getting moved over to Descent to Undermountain, which was the most confusing D&D game ever. And then from there, it was nonstop, just role-playing game, all for about past 21 years, I think. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's always very reassuring to hear, writers of your caliber get, seriously told to stop adding to the slush pile.
I think one thing that some writers trying to break in kind of forget about sometimes is that you get a lot of rejections. Like sometimes, like when I hear that, hey, you know what, like I didn't get accepted for this position, or I got turned down by this place. My reaction usually is, well, you have like 29 more rejections to go. So just as long as you don't give up and you keep being persistent, you will be convenient for someone at some time. Just don't give up.
Yeah, it's the law of averages, right?
Yep.
So I actually, probably about, I don't know, like 3 or 4 months ago, I, slightly embarrassing confession, had my first D&D experience. It was one of those weird things which, even though I've been...
Were you a D&D virgin, Danny?
I was. Well, I grew up on D&D games like Baldur's Gate and stuff from as early as I can remember. But it wasn't until very, very recently that I actually played it in person. And yeah, it was amazing. Obviously, it was super fun. I played it with actually an entirely gay group. So we had some really cool, flamboyant characters. such as the Velvet Partridge was a particular highlight, all like completely role playing. So it's very colorful.
The Velvet Partridge?
The Velvet Partridge.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was quite something. And I absolutely loved it. And it just, obviously, yeah, I'm a lifelong gamer, but, you know, there is something different that you get in D&D, that kind of level of freedom and kind of just off the cuff occurrence that you can't get in a game. You know, so how do you think that growing up with that, and then all of your experience actually, you know, writing for the kind of Icewind Dale and Interplay games has informed your broader writing and that idea of kind of, you know, the player agency and stuff? Like, how would you say that's influenced your whole oeuvre?
Well, that's an interesting question. I actually was talking with James Olin, who's the creative director at BioWare, a few months ago, and we were actually discussing how important the foundation of just doing pen and paper gaming was for the creative process. Like, just so many characters and ideas came out of those early sessions just because of the creative energy of the people around you.
Yeah.
That you know, to this day, a lot of those quote unquote tropes still end up in games now, because I'm like, wow, that was a really good experience for the players, or they liked the direction the adventure was going in here, or in other situations you realize that bad things that you did as a GM in pen and paper games are things you probably shouldn't do to 100,000 players. Like, oh, I think it'd be funny to steal all your items, or oh my god, reveal your secret identity, or stuff that players just generally aren't that thrilled about.
No.
And having that sort of immediate feedback around the table ends up being pretty important. I have to say, one of my favorite experiences when we were trying to do Fallout 3 back at Interplay was we actually had like Van Buren pen and paper sessions, and the amount of feedback I got on areas and quest lines and cool directions for NPCs or companions all basically stemmed out of those sessions, just because, you know, you have like 5 or 6 developers sitting around the table giving you feedback. It was a pretty worthwhile experience.
Nice. Must have been a bit of a trial by fire at times.
It was, you know, but considering that we really couldn't do anything else, because I was like the only guy on Van Buren, and there's really nothing more worthless than a designer by himself. But you know, programmers make it go, and art makes it pretty and worth looking at, but designers, they just have the words. So unless I was going to do like info context adventure, I really kind of out of luck. But then I'm like, oh well, maybe pen and paper would work, and I could like start introducing the team, like what the world's going to be like, and like what areas they design. And then that worked out pretty well. I had a pretty good time.
Yeah, it was good to hear. And I mean, it seems like, I'm not an expert on D&D by any means, but from what I can tell, it's, if not having a resurgence, and it's still, you know, going very, very strong. And it's quite interesting. It's the same with, you know, vinyl in the kind of music world. There's this like analog resurgence. And I read the other day, you know, even we hear about Kindles and stuff, that actual paperbacks are kind of still essentially like on the rise. Like, do you think that as kind of big games, you know, and big adventure experiences, all the AAA stuff get more and more complex, or, you know, complex in a certain way, that there's going to be even more need for those kind of experiences you just described?
I have never really seen interest in pen and paper really flagging. Like, the biggest challenges always seem to be getting a group together, but with the internet technology nowadays and the ability like to share out like cartography maps on screens, like it feels like it's a little bit
play
easier
on Twitch together and stuff, which is amazing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so I don't know if that's a demand. I think that people just always enjoy those type of games. I think I mean, like even back at Obsidian, would play like during lunch, like either Pathfinder or D&D, and we'd have like short fight sessions with various creatures that would usually end badly for me. We certainly just enjoy just doing it, even though most of our job was computer role playing. We still enjoyed the pen and paper tabletop version very, very much.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, though. It's just such a classic, enjoyable experience. I mean, I guess I slightly wonder sometimes how new generations of gamers will make that transition, because in the past it was very much D&D or Pathfinder or whatever to video games. So it'll be interesting to see how future generations kind of, whether they essentially make the reverse journey. But I guess we'll see.
Well, if the Velvet Partridge is any indication,
yeah.
I think they're off to a damn strong start. That's awesome.
I think so. So in terms of, you grew up writing campaigns and then obviously, now you're doing some of the biggest forthcoming RPGs. What would you say your kind of writing methodology, what is it in a way, what do those two styles of writing have in common for you? And how do you feel, again, that quote of yours earlier, just rolling out of bed, like no fuss, no distractions. What's at the heart of your writing methodology day to day?
Well, it's different than it was about a year and a half ago. What it is now is I realize that there's an awful lot that I don't know about other genres of gaming and writing for them. So it's been more of an experience.
What do you know least about?
There's two particular ones. One is communicating a roguelike experience is really interesting for writing. I'm sorry, actually, there's two other things. So roguelike experience, doing writing for VR projects is really interesting. I find that process pretty fascinating because of all the gestures and the head movements can communicate so much in terms of how people react to you and how you interact with them. And that's been kind of eye-opening. Like it takes even a simple adventure game to a totally different level when you know where the player is going to be looking at any one time. Like even most like casual conversations you have in real life. Like, are you making eye contact with a person? Like, do you proper handshake when you greet them? Like all those things. Like it's
those sort of tiny signals and
And then the other thing is. So I've never really gotten a chance to work on action titles before, like Prey and System Shock, and doing that has been a lot of fun because usually with role playing games, I would argue you probably have too much time for exposition. I think with action titles, you end up paying a lot more attention to the tone of the character, their delivery, and how to make it as brief and succinct as possible. Yeah, and that's a fun challenge to do because you're communicating a lot of story in just a few words.
Yeah,
and that's been a nice change of pace for me because sometimes I just need an editor, and like having an action game teaches me that I need to be more abbreviated when it comes to delivering text and delivering story, and it's nice to be able to sort of like train myself in a real world environment for that. So that's been kind of nice.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess it's a little bit like I'm a big fan of haiku, and you've got such a limited set of rules essentially and such tight restrictions that it forces a lot of creativity. And I mean, maybe going from something like an RPG, and as you say, I mean, you have the luxury of so much time for exposition and background, to something like Prey, where it's going to be a much more kind of confined experience. Those restrictions could maybe really kind of bring something new out. So what would you say your goals are for? I mean, I know you can't talk about any specifics, but generally, what are your hopes for the story you want to tell in Prey?
Well, Prey, I can't talk too much about. I don't want to spoil anything. For System Shock, the goal is sort of to examine first off the narrative pacing, because like sometimes what will happen is you have to be very careful about where you introduce voices and emails and logs, because where you place on the level is actually really important for. Hey, are you about to encounter a new monster? Like, are you about to enter an area where, for a simplistic example, it's going to be really noisy, in which case introducing a log at that point is probably not the best option. So some of it's like a technical consideration. The other thing is, okay, well, if they're remastering System Shock and then also expand the universe, like what new levels are being added, like in what ways do they want to expand the universe, in what ways the backers want to see the universe expanded. So that's seeing the directions for that has been pretty interesting. And again, like I've always had, you know, a lot of love for the System Shock franchise. Like the second one was the first one I played, and I thought number 2 was amazing. Like I'm like, if there's a design doc for how you should build a game, and System Shock 2 is pretty much it. So
yeah, of course. I mean, it's such a hallowed franchise and title. I mean, again, you're so experienced, so maybe not. But do you ever feel the kind of the weight of that public expectation and that game's kind of heritage on you, or is it very much just you're so excited to now be a part of it that it doesn't even factor in?
That's a good question. You know, it's a mix of both. One is I don't really want to disrupt what Looking Glass did with the first game. Like I have a lot of respect for Austin Grossman as an author. I think he's quite good. At the same time, like if they are going to add more areas and content, then I'm also excited to see how I can branch out from that spine and sort of tell side stories in the universe. I think it'd be kind of exciting. The universe is pretty rich just from the opening movie and System Shock 1 that I think there's a lot of rich material to sort of expand upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, congratulations on it being recently overfunded on Kickstarter. Amazing trailer.
Very happy about that. It's turned out quite well.
Yeah, and none of us can wait to play. Of course, it's going to be amazing, I'm sure. So aside from all the games that you're actually writing and all the kind of corollary stuff that will go along with that, what's been inspiring you lately? You know, whether it's another game or a book or a film or, you know, some food that's somehow given you a narrative insight. Like, what have you been, you know, just filling your head with to inspire you at the moment?
Well, it might be a bit of an odd answer, but going back to my conversation with James Olin, he recommended this book to me called Creativity Incorporated, which is about how Pixar got founded and some of Pixar's
that's a great book. Yeah,
and you know, I have found it really fascinating. Like, I think that their approach is really interesting. I also am amazed by how much the movies changed from pre-production before they reached the cinema. I'm like, I hear descriptions of Pixar movies in the book, and they bear no resemblance to what actually got made. It's like, wow,
you're like, did I miss someone? Or
I'm like, but it just proved to me that their process of iteration, it obviously worked for them, and they don't like have the story idea always nailed down. Like from one, it's a process of, you know, iterate, show, get feedback, figure out like what directions are working, what ones aren't, where, you know, where's the viewer getting bored, like why aren't they having, and they have the strength to make the sacrifices to make those changes happen. I think that's an important lesson from the book.
Yeah, I think that's a hugely important lesson. I mean, nobody likes cutting something, and we all get attached to what we make. But yeah, it is brave and necessary, I think, to sometimes kind of do that. And it makes me wonder sometimes. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, their whole story with Toy Story 2 and how, I mean, they had a moment there where they could have just given up and gone, okay, well, you know, it's going to be a video release. Like, let's just bite the bullet on this one. It's not really going to be that great. Let's cut the corners here. But then they rallied and they're like, well, you know, personally to us, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
And they're like, and we're willing to make the sacrifice to make that happen. And I think that element of sacrifice is important, because I think people hit those points sometimes. They're like, well, we'd really like it to be good, but it's inconvenient. And that's the moment that breaks my heart, because I think quality will win out every time, and you should be willing to make those sacrifices, because that's the stuff that keeps going well after you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Has there ever been a moment like that for you that you can remember, where it just, you know, you were working on something, just hitting a brick wall, like banging your head against it, and you had to just kind of, you know, take a different route or just try something unexpected to like break through it? Or is it just always perfect?
It's almost never perfect. But what we were talking about earlier about like parameters and constraints, like which we're talking about with the haikus, the trick was like, even when those were given to us, I mean, that just made the process a little more creative in the sense of, okay, well, I can't do what I usually do. So how do I communicate this theme or this idea when, for example, I can't have any voice actors, or like there can't be a single character in the game or in the area? Like how do I communicate a story then?
Yeah.
And that just, that allows you to grow in the sense of, well, obviously then I have to pay more attention to visual storytelling or sound effects, or how do I make that happen? And I think a lot of those obstacles can just end up being ways that you can find to make the game better or just to improve your skill set. So usually they've just been opportunities.
Yeah. How very optimistic of you. But
it's you know what, you can either let development drag you down, or you just like you just come back swinging from another direction.
No, of course. But I mean, and it has to surely be the same for pretty much anything in life. But especially writing, there are going to be those times, right, where you do hit the wall, or you realize it's not the best thing that you're ever going to make or that you ever have made. Sometimes you have to just kind of let it go and move on to finish a project. But sometimes, yeah, like you were saying with Toy Story, you just have to double down and figure out what's wrong and make it happen. True writing,
not to shoot myself in the foot and then play devil's advocate. There is also the danger of imbalance with that, though. Where, I mean, on some projects, like, you need to respect the quality, but at the same time, you should also respect when you need to close a project and keep that quality. Because sometimes I've seen teams just churn through ideas again and again, and because they're so used to an idea they've seen for a year, they automatically assume the player's going to be bored with it too.
Yeah,
and that's not true. Like, they're going to be seeing it for the first time, but they question themselves. They're like, well, this isn't as exciting as I wish it would be. And that's the kind of churn you have to watch out for. You're like, look, this may not seem new to you, but it's going to be very, very fresh to a new set of eyes. So let's listen to what the focus group says before you guys feel that everything needs to change again and again and again.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of like internal locus for that? Like, are there ever any questions you ask yourself when you're stuck on something and you're doubting, an idea or a piece of writing, where you say, like, like a filter or a set of questions or anything like that you kind of go through to try and get a perspective on it?
Actually, if I feel that I'm kind of drowning in a piece of work where I'm just like, I just cannot get the tone right, or it's not feeling right to me, usually I find there's someone on the team that I can bounce the ideas off of, or I can try and implement it, like with crappy voice acting, which is usually mine, and see how it feels to the player. And maybe I need to see this in a different format. And two people have been really good for that. Ricardo Bear at Arcane, he's really good for getting feedback on story elements and approaches, and I love working with him. And then also George Zeitz, who's working on the Tides of Numenera.
Oh yeah.
He really did help me out finding course corrections for some of my characters. He's very calm and level-headed, and he's like, here's what I think is working with your writing. Here's the parts where I think you're kind of getting off track, but here's maybe a suggested direction that you might want to go in that I think does work. And hearing that and getting feedback definitely can help you feel like you're getting back on track.
Yeah. So it's true, as they say, there's no such thing as good writing, only good editing.
Sometimes I get hammered. Well, not hammered, but I get hammered. Sometimes, like, some writers will get a little confused that I edit a lot. Like, I need to know like the rules for grammar for what we're setting up for the project and things like that. And I can't convey to them really how important editing is for a game experience. And if I get any flack, I try and do like, the Wasteland, T.S. Eliot's work probably wouldn't have been as good if Ezra Pound hadn't been around.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've always got that bullet in the chamber if I need to reinforce it. But I really do think editing is a huge part of the process. And one of the frustrating things I encountered in my career was even for role-playing games, it didn't seem anyone would realize the value of a good editor coming in. And when you have like over like 1 million words of text, or any typical role-playing game, not having an editor for it who can just balance things out is a very scary proposition. Like it's worth every dime to bring one of those folks in and go, look, now we need you to do a triage of all this and see what's really working and what's not. And good editors will do that for you.
Yeah. I think that's as you say, it can be, again, not just for writers, but for anybody, one of the hardest things to accept, somebody coming in and kind of doing that triage. But I think increasingly, especially in video games, like that's going to be an amazingly important role, as teams kind of change a little bit with the nature of technology. Those people that can just come in, and even if they're not necessarily like the writer or the lead artist, it can just, I think, take everything, especially with VR, as you say, and just somehow kind of like combine it and make it work somehow. Do you think that can be like
Yeah, that's what I really admire about BioWare. Like they recognize the importance of having an editor position, and then they make use of that person the way they should. I mean, it just makes sense to me. It clicks.
Yeah. Do you have any hopes for the future, both personal and for the kind of like broader industry? Whether it's like a broad idea, a general direction, or just something that you would really, really love to see happen? Again, like I say, well, 2 questions on the personal side and on the broader industry side.
Well, personally, I feel like I'm kind of doing a lot of the personal investigation right now, in the sense that I feel like I sort of got into a dialogue rut with a lot of previous games I've worked on, where, because I understand the established formula and the dialogue presentation and the mechanics weren't usually altered very much from game to game, you sort of fall into the same writing style after a while. And I think I just kind of needed to wake up and realize, look, maybe there's techniques that other types of games, that maybe RPGs too, but can teach you that would make my writing overall better for games. And I feel like I was kind of stagnating to an extent. And now having the chance to try sort of cut my teeth on new projects, I feel that's just going to make the writing overall better, and probably a lot less than what I usually write, which is good.
And good for your editor.
Exactly. And makes my editor stop crying. But for the industry, I feel like as far back as Half-Life 1, like that was kind of like the moment that people realized you kind of can't have a bad story anymore. Like there needs to be atmosphere. There needs to be people around. You need to feel like you're part of a world, and that world's telling a story. And if you don't, then you're going to get hit in the reviews for it, because now people are expecting a good story, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Like suddenly, like all the story writers out there start, lifting up their hands and cheering. It's like, yay! Like we've been validated finally. Like, and again, like it doesn't have to be with text. Like visual storytelling works wonderfully.
Of course.
But the nice thing is that I think it's wonderful that the game industry realizes the importance of a quality story.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. So, sadly, we're pretty much already coming up to the end of our kind of self-imposed allotted time. So just wanted to end very quickly with one thing we like to do, which is basically like a pay it forward question. It's been a while since the last one, so we're gonna start afresh. But if you would like to pose a question to our next guest, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be games related, but just something that you think would, you'd love to ask someone, a stranger maybe, for our next guest to answer.
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. Well, it would depend on what they did with their hobby time, but I guess my question would be, what's the worst story that you've encountered in a film or computer game? And if you could only do one thing to fix it, what would you do?
That's an amazing question, and actually it's going to fit perfectly with who our next guest is.
So. Oh, awesome. Perfect.
So thank you in advance for his answer to that. Cool. Well, Chris, thank you so much again for taking the time. It's been an absolute pleasure and very inspiring. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, Chris, thanks again.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Danny. I had a blast. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Bye, everybody. Okay, and we're done.
Danny, that was perfect. Thank you.
No. Thank you again. Seriously. So interesting to hear all this kind of things from you. I mean, I can't remember if I mentioned on the forum, but yeah, writing, writer producer for a small game. It's going to be a downloadable console game, probably in about January 2018.
Okay.
But yeah, it's the first game I've written. So
are you having fun with it?
Yeah, of course, dream job. So I wanted to get into it for years, and like you said, just wasn't having much luck. So the long story short is ultimately I just ended up like co-founding a small indie studio with these two amazing artists who had made like a game jam. It won the Cyberpunk Game Jam actually in 2014. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Well, yeah, it was just those two, Tim and Adrian, and they made this little flash demo in 6 days, and it was awesome. And yeah, long story short, I ended up just making a company with them. So as a way to finally get to write it. So
yeah, that totally works.
Yeah, I mean, if we had another hour, I would have loved to ask you more about everything with Obsidian and things, but yeah, I just yeah, I would keep you here all night.
Well, yeah, actually, if you want to, we can always chat at some point in the future. I like taking breaks to chat. Otherwise, I think I just stare at the computer screen way too long.
Oh, well, that's an amazing offer. I would definitely take you up on it. And I'll show you a little. We're just coming to the end of finishing our vertical slice. So we've got quite a nice little GIF that I can send you as well to show you what it looks like.
Yeah, let's check it out. I have to warn you, I have 15 other games approximately I have to look at first, but I would be happy to make it number 16.
Thank you. I mean, it's literally a GIF right now. It's not going to be properly playable for a while. So I'll literally just email you like a 2-second GIF. Just
all right. Sounds good.
Yeah, I think that should hopefully be not too much of a demand on your time. But
okay.
And yeah, I'll probably have this edited and up sometime over the weekend, I guess. So I'll send you a tweet and let you know that it's up and stuff. But yeah, it was super smooth and super interesting. So thank you once again.
Well, Danny, thank you again for inviting me. And if you ever have a spare slot at some point in the future, feel free. I love to chat about this stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, I would love to have you as a return guest. It's so interesting to be able to like follow up on stuff a couple of months down the line. So we'll be definitely taking you up on that offer.
All right, sounds great.
Cool. All right, Chris. Well, have a lovely afternoon. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon.
All right, take care, Danny.
Yes, bye.
Bye.